Welcome people, I'm Isaac Carlson, and today I want to discuss how Abuela Alma felt about her son-in-laws. Did she approve of Felix and Agustin? And of course, if you're new here, consider subscribing for more magical videos like this one, because we've been talking a lot about Encanto on this channel. Eventually, I know I'm going to want to talk about The Lion King and Tangled again eventually, and I really want to record in Walt Disney World now that I live nearby, but honestly, I couldn't stop these discussions until we got the chance to talk about Pepa and Julieta's husbands, because these guys are the best. Felix and Agustin are the coolest, nicest, and most supportive husbands and fathers around. But did Abuela think they were the right choices for her daughters when she first met them? We all know Alma can be extremely overbearing, judgmental, critical, and opinionated, especially when it comes to her family. Protecting her descendants truly came above all else for her, even though that sometimes would lead her astray. She just wanted the Madrigals to thrive after she had to struggle for so long on her own. So it would make sense that she would have some thoughts on who her daughters should marry. I mean, with her granddaughter Isabela, she was a full-on matchmaker plotting out her entire life until her plans went down the tubes. At that point, she pretty much freaked out like the matchmaker in Mulan.
You are a disgrace!
But even though Abuela got pretty extreme with her interference in her family's lives, from how Jared Bush, one of the directors of Encanto, described Abuela's initial connection with Felix and Agustin, it seems like Abuela was a lot less intense and more understanding years ago, but she still didn't love both of them at the start. What I think is important to understand is that Felix and Agustin have the family they grew up with in the Encanto. They just don't all live in La Casa de Madrigal. They grew up there, so they were known by Abuela because everyone there either escaped with her and Pedro years ago or descended from that initial group. Abuela knew the background of every boy who her daughters could be interested in. She watched all of them grow up with her own children, so even when she was introduced to these guys, she probably had some opinions formed before they ever arrived. Again, according to director Jared Bush, Felix was able to charm Abuela very easily. The example that truly shows Abuela's affection towards Felix is at Antonio's party, where he is able to break down her walls and get her onto the dance floor. They were able to vibe together and have fun. She was always fond of Felix, so when Pepa fell in love with him, Alma completely backed their marriage. I mean, she was the one who got them the umbrella when Pepa's hurricane was going off at their wedding. She was ecstatic for Felix to join the family. Agustin, on the other hand, was most likely not Abuela's first choice for Julieta. You see, Agustin and Julieta met because Agustin was always getting hurt around the Encanto because of how clumsy and accident prone he was, which meant that he spent a lot of time going to Julieta for her healing food. They got to bond over time, and from the concept art, it seems like they both were just sweeping each other off their feet, and eventually they fell in love. I'm not exactly sure what it was that turned Abuela off from Agustin. Sure, he doesn't have the same type of magnetism as Felix, but that's a hard act to follow, and he was just as kind and considerate. But one way Agustin did stand out from the rest was because he was more of a city man. Felix was inspired by the Colombian Caribbean coast, and he fit in with most people in the Encanto who were from small villages from across the country. According to the art of Encanto, though, the creators explicitly chose to expand the family's origins by giving Agustin a three-piece suit to show he came from a different place than most people in the Encanto, making him a fish out of water. In my last video discussing an early concept for Isabela's true love, that boy, Bubo Marquez, had a lot of similar traits to Agustin, as he was also supposed to be a kind of awkward city boy who did not fit in incredibly well with the rest of the town. And Isabela knew Abuela would not have approved of Bubo, which further leads me to believe Agustin's cultural differences were the main things that kept him from being embraced immediately by Alma. But since Julieta loved him, Abuela was kind of just forced to allow them to get married. But it definitely worked out for her. Having Felix and Agustin in the Madrigals made their family better. In addition to both of these guys seeming to have very romantic sides to them, Felix is always by Pepa's side to comfort her. He's always cheering on his kids and is ready to have some fun with his family. And Agustin is always ready to be there for his wife and daughter's struggles. He tries to protect them whenever he can, and he'll run to them when they are upset. Even though they didn't have magical powers, they were doing everything they could to help their family. families. And they raised some pretty amazing grandchildren for Abuela too. Agustin even adored his daughter so much that every day he wore a flower to represent Isabella and had socks that represented Luisa and Mirabel. Something I think is underrated too about Felix and Agustin is that they got along beautifully. One of the most awkward things that can arise in families is when the in-laws are completely shunned or when two sibling spouses don't really interact with one another. That's just a recipe for so much weirdness, but Felix and Agustin related to one another since they were both outsiders without powers in the family Madrigal. There was even concept art showing that the two couples were so close that they would have gotten married on the same day. But while they didn't have the same wedding, they did get the same last name. I'm sure by Abuela's request, they took the Madrigal last name for themselves, and that probably just brought them even closer together. In early drafts of Encanto, we are going to get to see the son-in-law's friendship explored a lot more, as they would have been a dynamic duo in the family. In Deleted Scene, for example, we would have seen them show Mirabel how to be in charge of keeping the casita clean as everyone else went into town to use their gifts. They kind of liked their chores, since Abuela wasn't around and they could kind of go do whatever they wanted. The burden of being a Madrigal that was always weighing on them was able to be relieved just a little bit when they were on their own. Like every other member of the family, Abuela put pressure on them to be their best selves and to lift up the Madrigals. While they didn't have any magical gifts though, they certainly were always putting an effort to be there for those who needed them, and the love they showed for their family could never be in question. Doing that made them pretty special, and I think especially once Abuela was able to open her eyes and see how wonderful all of the Madrigals truly were, she would more than approve of the men her daughters fell in love with. But fun people, what do you think? Do you believe Abuela grew to like Felix and Agustin? And who was your favorite in-law? There, of course, is no right answer. I really enjoy Felix though, but I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments or over on our Imaginative Discord server. If you want to listen to any of my discussions, you can find all of my content also over on my podcast, which is linked down below. Finally, thanks for watching, and of course, have a magical day.